Hello everybody, welcome Sea Wolves, and a very good Monday morning to you. I have a beautiful cup of coffee to make the Monday morning go down extra good, so maybe you have something delicious too, and we can do a little bit of a simultaneous sip. Full credits to Scott Adams, of course, for that idea. So here we go, 3, 2, 1, and... that makes the Monday go down good, doesn't it? So let's get started. The race of the 2020 Vendee Globe has started yesterday in Salle de Salon, and yeah, I have to say that the pre-race stuff, because of all of the corona restrictions, I really felt a bit bad about that, especially for the racers, but I have to, really give it to the organization. So much kudos for you guys to stand firm, to hold this race no matter what, and to make it possible to do this safely. And even though, for my mind, I don't want to pretend that I really liked to see something when I really didn't. So, the interviews, everybody in masks, all this type of stuff really didn't make me feel good at all. But of course, the rest of the race was really exciting, and I just want to give full kudos to the race organization, for making this possible and sticking to actually doing this event. So thank you for that. Now, the start was right away very exciting with Louis Burton from the Bureau Vallée deciding that he was going to go on this race no matter what, and actually had a beautiful start, but started the race actually about 4 or 5 seconds before the race actually started.
Director starting the race.
4, 3, 2, 1, top!
And so right away earned himself a 5-hour race stay penalty, which means that somewhere before he reaches the point of Marseille, he has to actually pause racing, take his sails down, and just kind of float around and wait for 5 hours before he can rejoin the race again. Ouch, that's gotta hurt. But other than that, very conservative, very relaxed start. All the skippers, obviously the race is 48,000 kilometers, so no need to really put lots of risk into the start. Of course, sailing is a sport where often the rich get richer, so from that point of view, always good to be in the head of the pack, of course, but generally we saw most of the race favorites keeping their distance and just slowly easing into the race. Having said that, Jeremy Bijou on Chirel very confidently took the lead. Not too surprising, since he's of course one of the ultimate race favorites, mainly because he's had the most time off the water with his new boat, Chirel, and that experience, I think, really showed off. So let's get a little bit into the strategies that were happening yesterday, and then we get into the weather prediction today, because there are some very, very interesting things happening, and my God, have they got their work cut out for us, or for them, in the next 48 hours or so. So the first thing where we really saw a difference in approach pretty much throughout the whole fleet is that with the light wind, so 5 to 10 knots, but a prediction for the wind to increase quite a bit, up to like 15 to 20, only like an hour or two after the start, we saw that some of the boats, Jeremy Bijou of Chirel being one of them, made the choice to go for for full head sails, so using basically code zeros, or their biggest mastheads reaching sails, basically giving them a bit of extra speed, while about half of the rest of the fleet chose a more conservative sailing setup. So I think Hugo Boss, for example, also they kind of stuck with an A1 or an A2, and therefore had a little bit less sail area up, sailing a little bit more conservatively, lacking a little bit of top speed in that initial start, but probably counting on the fact that as the wind would increase, they wouldn't have to make a sail change, taking off a giant masthead sail, while maybe people like Jeremy would be needing to do that later. And so for the first 10 hours or so of the race, we saw that the boats that opted for the larger sail plan were developing a significant amount more speed, with often Chirel especially reporting boat speeds of up to 25 knots, with most of the other foilers only reaching speeds of about 20-21 knots. So a comfortable advantage. So his experience and his choice of sailing setup really paid off there. Pretty much from the start, he took the head of the pack and then set the pace throughout the first 10 to 12 hours. But as we went into the night, the wind especially became quite patchy, sometimes going down quite a bit and then picking up again quite a bit. So as far as I can see, the sailors probably didn't get any sleep tonight, as they were constantly needing to adjust everything and reset and retrim everything in order to keep pace with each other. So very interesting, but I think very tiring, and they're not through it yet at all. So we saw a clear difference between the foilers and the non-foilers. Basically, with this wind, 5 to 10 knots, that's enough to develop a boat speed of about 13 to 14 knots for the foilers, and that's the speed where the foils really start to kick in, and it basically gives the boat a 3 to 5, sometimes 6 knot bump in speed. And so pretty quickly, as the boats were starting to hit that 13, 14 knot speed mark, we saw that the foiling boats were jumping up to speeds of 20, 23, sometimes 24 knots, while the non-foiling boats were sticking around with speeds of about 13, 14, sometimes 15 knots. So the difference and the advantage of the foils on this beautiful reaching course were very apparent right from the start. And when you look at the tracker right now, you see that the foilers made a lot more distance. But of course, when I opened the tracker this morning, what's very interesting is that, and we'll switch to showing you the tracker also right now, is that of course you can see that if we look here on the racetrack, that basically the group of foilers here really separated itself for the most part from the main group. But we can also see that some of the foilers stayed in here, and that's basically because, well, you can see the ideal racetrack kind of here in the bottom, and the way the wind was hitting the boats really drove the foilers up for the most part, except basically for Hugo Boss, and who more do we have here, Maître Coq, so Yannick Besthaven and Isabel Joschke, who chose to stay with the lower course, keeping a lower speed, beating more into the wind, and I think positioning themselves better. From the start, I was really looking very intensely at Yes We Can from Jean Le Cam, and I think he took the right strategy, and unsurprisingly, he's actually right now #1 in the official classification. He was pretty much the only boat who from the start set basically the highest beating course possible, not really enjoying the reaching conditions, but you know, really working hard to get his boat more towards the southwest than all of the others. And I guess it really paid off, because the way this weather system is hitting them is really pushing everybody to the north, which of course is not good. And when we look at the weather predictions for the upcoming hours, we're going to see that some very, very interesting, very, very tactical sailing is going to be necessary to really catch the lead. Because more or less the first person to go around the Point of Spain at A Coruña is going to be really in the lead. And until that moment, everything is very, very relative. So let's look at what happened, shall we? Here that the fleet more or less, and I'm talking about the head of the fleet, so the foilers are up here, the rest is a little bit more down, a little bit more to the east still. But well, we're looking at the weather now of 12 o'clock today as I'm taping this. But then we will see that, well, right now the boats, especially in the head of the pack, are basically beating maximally into the wind. So you can see their course here. This is their location. And here on the map, I kind of put a point there. So right now they're maximally beating, but as the prediction progresses, we will see that 1 o'clock, still similar conditions, probably best to keep beating. But then around 2 we see that the wind starts to turn, and so between 2 and 3 they're going to, well, if I had my say, have to tack the boat really at the first opportunity, because look to the left of the screen, look at this system building, and that's going to go very fast later in the day. So as we progress to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, then we go to 6 o'clock, and then you see this light patch coming in from the bottom of the screen here. We go to 7, it goes up more. Then we go to 8, 9, it comes up really a lot more. And then as we go into the night, I'll run through a little bit faster here, we can see that we get some really strong winds from the south. And so basically between 2 o'clock, so I'll browse back there here in the prediction, between 2 o'clock when they get a chance to start sailing straight to the south basically, so they'd have to go as much into the wind, as much southwest as they can here, and try to get south as fast as possible using this wind. So up until about 9 o'clock tonight they'll have patchy wind, but a good direction to get southward. And then as we go into the night, we see that the wind starts turning, and pretty much by 5 o'clock next day in the morning, they're gonna have the wind, no matter where they go, fully against them. And the more west they can make it in the time, the better. Now, as the wind develops in the morning, they're going to probably have to make straight westward to get away from this light patches here around the course that's going to stay around. But this storm is really going to come in. And so if we look at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, or this is actually 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, then we see that basically we have this range here that would be quite possible to beat into, and that way make their way across the coast of Spain and Portugal. But this storm is going to keep getting stronger, it's going to keep developing, and it's going to move right towards the coastline with wind speeds of, well, basically up to 38 knots in the prediction. So in reality, that might be gusts, 40, 50 knots, which is really not what you want as far as sea state goes in the Bay of Biscay. Those are really dangerous sailing conditions. That means, waves 5, 6, maybe more meters high, if you're especially unlucky. So tough on the boats. So going into that or going through that is probably the last thing that the sailors want to do at this moment. So they're going to have to make a choice somewhere tomorrow, probably somewhere around, probably somewhere between 12 and 4. They have to really make sure that they're somewhere around here, and then make their way down through this ever shrinking green patch along the coast. And then as we go into Wednesday, hopefully they can make their way beyond this, and then in the aft end of the storm make their way through this little doldrum, this little ridge here, to then get to the other side where of course the winds will be much more favorable, and then they can really continue their way down, and then they would be in a really good position, while this system here to the east is going to basically create almost nothing but trouble, where it would be a full beat for the sailors for most of the time. Lots of light patches, really not where you want to be. But it's going to be some real technical sailing. So one more time, I'll run it through. This is now, so they'll be sailing up. Then around 2 they have to turn, sail down. And then as the system comes in, as much westward as possible. And then as the storm comes in, they'll have to try to start beating into this, making their way down. And that probably means a lot of tacking tomorrow in the end of the day to try to get southward as much as possible to hopefully get beyond this storm. But it's going to be really a tough thing. And so when we look at the positioning in the light of that report, I'll zoom in a little bit, or I'll zoom out a little bit on the tracker here, then we can see that of all the boats, I would say that yes, we can, and Hugo Boss probably, which is at the head of this second pack here, are probably actually in the best position, while the rest of the foiling fleet that went out quite far ahead of the rest of the pack is actually not in a great position, because as soon as the wind turns, everybody will be able to tack and start making their way westwards. And though the foiling fleet is a little bit more to the west of the rest of the fleet, the distance that they traveled northward, I think, is going to be too much, and they're actually going to be behind once they make the tack significantly. So my guess is that out of all of this, most likely we're going to see either the Hugo Boss or the Massif or Maître Lecoq come out victoriously, or we're going to see Yes We Can or one of the non-foiling boats like VMB Mayenne or Group Apicil come out victorious and make their way around the point of Spain at A Coruña the first. And once they do that, they'll be in a really good position to get below that storm and actually really take the head of the race. So that will be my prediction for the next few hours, is that probably around between 2 and 4, they'll make the tack, start making their way southwest, as much west as possible, but it's going to be strong beating conditions. And then as the storm comes in, we'll see what happens. I'm curious to see if some of the boats maybe will decide to actually head in the storm. So if we return to the maps here, of course, there is also the option for them to actually move through this system. So you know, between the two really storm centers, to try to make their way through here, through the ridge, to get to the other side of that system, and then have great conditions basically to make their way. But yeah, that's going to be really tough on the boats, because you know, this type of conditions in this particular area of the world can really produce some of the worst seas imaginable. So if it was me up there, I wouldn't take the risk to go through there, and I would take my chances going down in this ridge here, and then you know, maybe making my way through the aft end, like so, behind the center of the storm. There should be great wind to pass through there. That I would definitely do, but I wouldn't go through the storm center. So yeah, we'll see what the guys and girls will do. I'm very, very curious to see what they will choose. If some of you guys are in the virtual regatta, unfortunately I don't have time to do that myself. I'll be traveling actually for the next 3 days also, so I will do updates, no worries about that, but they'll be from different locations every time. And yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys think. So let me know in the comments, and maybe give a little timeline when you think they'll make the tack and what they will do. Will they go through the storm or not? I'd love to hear your opinions. Also, I want to thank the first backers and supporters of the channel. So we now have a website. It's seawolvestv.com. We already have several backers. I'm really super excited that you guys you know, made the step to actually support the channel. Also, several people approached me with ideas for animation and design, so I'm talking to them. So we're definitely going to up the level on that very soon. So I'm very excited about that also. So thank you very much for watching. Tomorrow I'll do another update, and we'll see how much of you know, what we've been talking about today has come true or not. Interesting to see that yesterday there were also some communications about the weather predictions being quite far off. So that's also something that I already predicted. And so we'll see how much of this prediction comes true and what happens. It's also exciting, isn't it? So have a great day, and I'll talk to you again hopefully tomorrow. Ciao.